Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the official Oscarina nomination coverage for The Secret of Mana. Secret of Mana is an action RPG developed and published by Square. It was released on the Super Nintendo in 1993 and is the first entry in the Mana series of games, which itself is something of a spin-off from Final Fantasy The Adventure on Game Boy. My name is Mitchell, and I'll be your host for the evening. Here with me is fellow Oscarina voter Tom. Tom, thanks for coming on board.
Hi, I'm also here. Thanks for having me.
Bit of a throwback for those of you who know us from our other channel.
Anyway,
okay.
back to Secret of Mana. So
Yes.
what are our nominations for this one?
So Secret of Mana scored 3 nominations for Best Gameplay, Fellowship and Relaxation, Best Art Direction, and Best Original Score. So not up for Best Pixel, but it does have a nice trio of nominations, and we're going to tell you all about them.
Yeah, all right. So I guess I'll start off by talking a little bit about the cooperative RPG experience for this game, which is marketed as up to 3 players. When you're playing on the Super Nintendo, unless you have a multi-tap, that's realistically going to be for 2 players. And couch co-op itself is a bit of a strange beast. The game starts out with only 1 playable character, and over the course of the first act, you gather the remaining members of your party. So it takes it. I think for this most recent playthrough I did with my partner, it took me about an hour to get to a point where she actually had a character that she could play as, and I was just kind of running around, and she was half paying attention, half looking at her phone, just to kind of get the beat of the story beats in particular. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, the story too, I should probably touch on really quick. So the kind of basics of the premise is that you are in this village, but you're kind of an outsider, and then you end up pulling out the mana sword that's been kind of this enshrined relic for the village, and they see that as a superstitious act that then unleashes monsters on the town, and so they kick you out, and thus begins your adventure. I don't know too much about the story beyond that. I actually played the game just solo, and captured some footage, some of which you're seeing here. The other is some other clips from the later portions of the game are a guy by the name of Pretzel. So thank you, Pretzel, for your contribution. I had a harder time adapting to it, but I think it was the lack of cooperative play that was really getting to me, because it's a very different beast on your own, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. When I first played this, I played this mostly like solo on my friend's Super Nintendo in like his garage as like a 10-year-old or something like that, but he was doing something else all the time, and I was just like, I'll play this game, whatever. And it is a different beast. Like, it ends up becoming a lot more thinky, a lot more like tedious, I guess, when you're trying to control all 3 characters. Because like once you have unlocked all of the characters and added them to your party, the cooperative elements of this game really start to sing. It's a game designed for couch co-op. It has instant drop-in and drop-out. Like, you can do this with the click of a button. Just add a player or have them start following. If a player wants to go and get up and like go grab a drink or use the bathroom, they can literally click a button and they'll just start following the other player.
Oh wow!
And
that's crazy.
Yeah, it's great. Characters, despite having different roles, can like all use all the same gear or weapons. Not all the same gear, but all the same weapons are available to the party. And the radial menu, which is fantastic. And has been used in a lot more recent games, like to this day, like some of the more recent Zelda games, is just really sings and lets you kind of swap everything around between all your party members, use all your items, all your spells. Very easy to navigate. And it like even lets you pause and strategize if you need to just take a breather and be like, okay, I don't really know how to beat this boss. What should we do?
Yeah, wow. These details really push the relaxation element a lot more than I think I was expecting, and like the cooperative stuff, because I didn't realize it was so smooth. In so many cooperative games, you have to like decide at the main menu how many people are playing, okay, assign controllers, okay, and then go. And then if you want to change that, you have to go back out to the menu and readjust. It's really fascinating that it's set up just for a click of a button, and you can take breaks or have different players jump in. That's like a really great way to go about that. I had no clue that it was just so conducive to that experience.
Yeah, it really feels designed for that, and it's like there's a lot of other stuff in this that makes like that you can kind of tell it's not a hard game to follow and just pick up, right? Like that, like you touched on the plot is pretty basic. Your main character I think his name's Randy. He finds a rusty sword and pulls it out of a stone. That's a pretty easy trope to follow. And then, oh no, that sword was protecting the village, and now he's vanished. And also somehow the chosen one, because that sword maybe was actually magical.
He pulled out the sword, of course he is.
People like the sword. He pulled out the sword of a stone. Yeah, I mean, like, you kind of like, okay, yeah, fine. And then he meets a couple other people, like the Prim, the girl you meet, is kind of out looking for like her lost love, who, spoilers, I guess, gets taken by the big bad evil guy.
Spoilers.
And then you find like a sprite who's lost his memory, and he's like working in a circus of dwarves or something like that. And like it's all this kind of very like easy fantasy things that you can kind of just follow if you're familiar with the genre at all. And then you just have to go and find like the 8 MacGuffins in the dungeons, and there's a big bad evil guy named Thanatos who's building a doomsday device or reactivating a doomsday device. It's like it's not hard to follow the story and just pick it up and be like, all right, that's the bad guy, cool, I see that. And then like I think since the characters do have some specialization, Randy, your main character guy, he's a bit tanky. Prim, the girl, is really good at casting support magic, but can't really do any other types of magic. And then your sprite friend is, whose name I can never remember, is very fragile. Like, he doesn't get as much health when he levels up, but he has really strong combat magic. Those kind of things let you kind of specialize and take which one you want to be. And like, if you want to be more of the like support caster, like that's kind of the role I ended up playing a lot more, was because I like being support casters. I ended up playing Prim a lot, but I could still kind of pick up the sword if I wanted to use a sword for a while, or use the what is it called, like the chakram throwing spiky wheel thing.
Those are awesome.
I wanted to be a little bit ranged.
Chakrams.
Yeah, they're so
Such
cool.
a cool weapon.
And like, yeah, and even though like the way that like, so the support spells, one of the support spells you can get is like identify what their weaknesses are, and it like makes those boss fights a little bit easier, because you can just be like, oh, this guy's weak to I can't remember the ice spirit's name, but it says like weak to ice spirit or whatever, and you're like, oh cool, go ahead, sprite guy, go ahead and blast that guy with some ice magic. Randy, you go in and just hit him with a sword and distract all his attacks, and then Prim will buff you and heal everyone that's getting hit a lot. But because that combat is so straightforward, there's a lot of room to iterate, and you end up with bosses like a wall with 3 eyes that's gradually pushing you towards another spiky wall, and all the eyes have different weaknesses. So you end up like, when we were playing through, I was like, oh cool, I've identified their weakness is fire. And then I tried to cast fire on one of them, and it was like, oh, that one's actually gets healed from fire. Hold on, these eyes have different weaknesses. And it kind of like, it does like keep you on your toes a little bit. And then my final point is like, these are characters that are really fun to look at. The world is very fun to look at. But everything kind of tells you through the design of the sprites, or through their kind of like just the way they move throughout the world, what those, like in a very straightforward way, what those characters are good at, or what that boss is strong against, or what that enemy is going to do to you. There's like a really high flying guy that you can't hit with your weapon, so you have to use magic on him. There's guys that are made of stone that if you try and hit them with a light weapon, you're probably not going to hit them. But if you hit them with a heavier weapon, you have a better chance to hit them. And it really kind of like harkens back to like this, it's kind of very much like the mechanics of the game are meeting up with the art direction in a very like satisfying way that really tell you how to play through this game without being too prescriptive, I guess.
I think it's cool that it sets up scenarios, even if they're simplistic, to like force the players to coordinate with each other and figure out information. Like when I play video games with my nephew, this is very much a game that I think would be fun to add, because in a lot of cases, like, you know, he's 8 and he doesn't have any siblings, or at least he does now, but she's a little baby. So he's always trying to get someone to jump in and play his game. And just as like from a practical level, the fact that like parents can come in and out and other siblings to kind of keep the little ones entertained, I think is actually a very nifty feature. But it's also cool because everybody gets to work together, and I'm a big fan when they set up co-op games where everybody has like a specific task that they're trying to do, and that they're different from one another, as opposed to just saying you're all in the game, but you're all doing basically the same thing, like a beat 'em up, for example. I mean, those can be fun too, but I kind of like the experience that prompts every player in the room to do a little something that's unique to them and their character.
Yeah, and I think like for me, playing through it again this time, that was a revelation that I got to have and be like, oh wow, wait, you're the tank, because my partner wanted to play the person that didn't use any magic mostly. So I was like, oh, you were supposed to go in and hit the boss and like make sure the boss is like focusing all his attacks on you, because it's kind of hard to dodge in this game, because you have a ton of health. I have all the healing spells, so you don't need to worry about spending your time thinking about healing. I'll just watch your health bar. You just hit them. We'll have the little sprite guy who kind of both of us were controlling, because we could both kind of go over to his menu and just use the combat spells when we felt like, oh, we have a second to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it has this stamina meter that you have to use, so it's sort of like cross between what am I thinking of, a turn-based RPG versus like an action-focused game. I think that's another curious decision of their part too. It's sort of like a hybrid of the two as opposed to being full committal.
Yeah. No, that's really true. I didn't even talk about the stamina bar, which I think is like the thing most people talk about at first. So you have this choice in the game to do really kind of ineffective attacks very rapidly, which is sometimes the right choice if you're trying to just interrupt something that doesn't have a very high defenses attack. Or you can wait a set amount of time until like you hear a little ding, and then you can hit really hard with one swing and then wait again for the ding. But
yeah.
Did you play it all around with like the AI that was in the game? Like how you could go into your different characters and be like, you're going to be aggressive, or you're going to avoid characters, or you're going to stay near me.
I didn't, but I wasn't bothered by the AI. I thought the AI did a pretty good job. It was mostly me. I was just bad at the game. I found the stamina thing a little bit unwieldy, and it makes a lot of sense to run up and hit somebody, back off, and then let a teammate go up and hit them and kind of tag team. And maybe that's part of what the stamina meter was trying to do. But when you're playing by yourself, that's not relevant. You go up, attack, and then you just want to hit them again, but you're forced not to. That was just, it was unusual. It wasn't necessarily bad. It was just, it surprised me, and I found it a little strange to adapt to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think when we were playing, we did like a little bit of the AI messing around, because mostly like we had the little sprite guy who's kind of weak as our like AI controlled buddy. So you're like, just stay away from people. And we'll give you the ranged weapons so you can attack from a distance if you really want to, but mostly don't get killed, because you keep using all of our sacred tears to like regenerate lives.
Little bastard. That's hilarious. I actually love it when games have that scenario where you collectively get pissed off at an NPC character. It's sort of like Mario Party when you're playing with 3 people or even 2, and then you set the difficulties up really high so that way you can be more annoyed at them.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, the sprite died a lot though. It was, and like it's
like, I can't undersell this sprite.
Yeah, it's like great because like on the one hand, like your gear is shared, right? Like so everyone has access to the same gear, and like if the party shares gold, so if anyone buys any of the gear or any of the consumables, anyone can use that. But on the other hand, that means you can't just buy the guy that keeps dying their own revives. You all have to use the same revives, and you're just like, all right, guy, stop it. Maybe hang back. I was also playing the healer, so this I think kind of annoyed me the most, because I'd be like focusing on Amber, who was tanking, and then the little sprite guy would just show up as dead next to me, and I'd be like, what did you took one attack? What's going on? I didn't have time to heal you. I was healing.
So. I was healing the more important person.
Yeah.
Can you switch? So wait, you could switch characters. Could you play the little guy?
So I could switch on the fly as well. So if I wanted to, I could very easily become the little guy. But also from the radial menu, you can open up the NPC's radial menu no matter who you are. So Amber could open up her radial menu, then click on. I think it's the other one. Anyway, then also click on and go to the NPC's radial menu and do like the big power magic if she wants to, even though the NPC was following me most of the time. Yeah, I don't think I have too much more to say, because like it actually does work, and I think it's like a grid or something, right? So you have like avoid or engage, and like attack or defend, I think, or something like that. So you can kind of go anywhere on this like grid of like you can be avoid and attack, which is what we ended up putting our little sprite guy to. So he would run away from people, but then like throw his little shock runner bow and arrow at him. And then you could go to defend and engage. So if you wanted to not play the tank at all, you could just have the tank kind of run in and like kind of be kind of constantly like blocking or trying to dodge out of the way.
I appreciate their commitment to making the game as comprehensively smooth that the cooperative element, because it's a huge misstep in so many games. It's sort of this like element they throw on because it can do it, as opposed to making that the focus of your experience. So yeah, it's definitely a very good worthy nominee for the category, I think. It reminds me of like a sort of a precursor to the Tales games, because the Tales games have that long form cooperative experience to which you play a character, and that character always has special abilities or special moves. But that one's, more action focused, and that comes years later.
Yeah, and honestly, so the same people that I would the people I would recommend playing this game are the same people that I would recommend playing those games. Like this is going to work very well if you're playing it with a significant other or with your kids or with like your family, because the one like big gripe I have about it is it's a very long game. Like you're supposed to be collecting the 8 seeds, the 8 mana seeds, but there's actually more dungeons than 8, right? Like you end up, I think, doing 10 or 11 dungeons throughout the course of the game, and it doesn't like necessarily overstay its welcome. But if you were trying to do that with like a friend who just comes over every now and then, or anyone besides someone you're sort of sharing your living space with, it would take an extremely long time to get through the entire game.
I see. Yeah, and you're going to want that satisfaction at some point. So yeah, I can see that. But, in a weird way, it kind of promotes that people actually like meet up and sit down on the couch and play together, which, and like our present day, like there was so much backlash when they removed split screen co-op and like Halo games. And that's because it's this, modern push for everything to just be digital interfacing. So I kind of think it's cool that I guess it's retro and it's not necessarily indicative of what it would be now, but still a fun pastime to go back, something that does promote good interactions with people you actually care about. It seems like a super, super relaxing game throughout, especially like, because we're going to talk about the visuals here in a minute, but it just has a very, very warm atmosphere, even if you're in like a spooky place.
Yeah, I think so. I think even when you're in like a stressful boss fight, like that one where the wall is slowly like pushing you towards the other wall, it doesn't feel too stressful. I think like the sort of stamina meter that kind of forces like this like, hey, slow down and think for a second. The radial menu being able to just pull up and kind of pause the game and talk about what you want to do with the person you're playing with. It really kind of lends itself to just taking like a step back and being like, this is an experience that I'm having with this other person that I'm playing with or by myself, and it doesn't feel too stressful.
And like, to go back to the character models you mentioned, like the sprites are just super, super richly detailed. Even the NPCs, they have like this luscious flowing hair and intricate costumes. They're just super vibrant. That it's very eye-catching, but I think that's also probably an intended effect they knew they needed to hit, because you have a cooperative game, and so everybody needs to be able to see who they are along with the environment. One of the things that's always been a challenge getting like when I was a kid to get my dad to play, I'd always want him to play Super Smash Brothers with me, and then he would just say, I can't tell what's going on because I can't see my character. And so he would tend to lean towards a character that has a really distinctive look from everybody else, so to help him like keep track of that. And this game is just sort of the default option.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think like it's such a pretty game to look at too, and I think this is maybe going a little bit more into the world, but the world is so vibrant as well. Each different area kind of feels like it's in a different biome, but like it's slightly different, I think, than like your traditional like, oh, here's the ice biome, oh, here's the desert biome, oh, here's the I guess woods biome. Because like in the woods biome, for example, you actually end up walking into different areas, and like the puzzle is based around trying to go through each season of the woods.
Oh, that's awesome.
So within the woods, you have like this basic woods. Here's the green woods, and then you have like 4 different areas that are like, here's the fall woods, here's the winter woods, here's the summer woods, here's the spring woods, and they do a very good job of telegraphing those changes, and because they have to, because it's part of the puzzle.
Yeah. That's cool that it's interlinked like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly has a lot more variety than I think my initial like scrubbing through footage of the game gave off, and I did some more research and then had found some people that were commenting about some of the nice details. Like one is there's this vent where water is flowing out from the castle grounds, and that's such like a small detail that's totally unnecessary, but what a nice little touch that adds to the believability of the world. So it's just chock full of, this all-encompassing beauty. There's so much like water effects and plants and just all this extra detail that, I don't know, it's a very mesmerizing game to pick up and play. And I think that helps too with if you're wanting to sit down with some friends. It's like a comfort space, right? It adds to that relaxation element.
It's very transportative, I think, as well. Like, you do feel like, oh, this is a world I haven't been to before. This is new and interesting, and I do want to explore it. Cover art, right? You see flamingos on the cover. Not, I don't think they're flamingos, but they're these big pink birds, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, that's not something I necessarily see in, like, a fantasy that I can think of off the top of my head. This is, like, this pinkness, this vibrant pinkness with the green background. It's so striking, and I think like that's the entire world. Like in every area, there's like something that's just like, oh, that's so striking. I just kind of want to look at that.
Yeah, there's like a fortress you go to, and there's just these really pretty crystals that are shimmering in the background. And when I'm looking into a lot of other games that will have your stereotypical factory sequence or something akin to that nature, it's meant to be drab and dreary, and that's works for it because it's part of the environment, but it's interesting to see how Secret of Mana always makes sure there's lots of flavor and life to every environment you go to. And I think it's kind of complemented too by its use of Mode 7. It's got some cool effects in there, like with the cannon and the dragon riding as well.
Yeah, I think the Mode 7 is... I think I really appreciate it, and I think I'm glad they took a stab at it. It's very difficult to control. I think especially once you get to like the part where you can ride around on your dragon, the controls are not intuitive at all.
Okay.
And sort of because of that, or maybe in spite of that, like you do kind of start to get an appreciation for like the map of the world, because this is like the first time you're actually interacting with like an overhead map of the world. As you're flying around on this dragon. But really the reason you start to appreciate it is because it's a hard dragon to control, and there's not a lot of like I think this was like the one roadblock that we had. Like the rest of this game, you kind of find your way through some bits. Maybe you get defeated by a boss a couple of times, but it's not a big deal. I think the one time my partner got up and was like, all right, you just do this part, was when we first got the dragon, and she was like, and we just got lost because it's such a weird beast to control. So we eventually got through it. It wasn't like a huge stumbling block, but it was definitely like the part where my partner was just like, all right, just do it. I'm gonna walk away. And it also does take away it takes away the co-op for a second, right? Like only one person can control the dragon. So it is like a weird moment of just like, this could have been, you could have done this a little bit better. I'm not really sure how, but
it does sound like a moment you would pass the controller around once someone gets frustrated with the control stuff. So perhaps it was multiplayer.
Maybe that's the intention.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of the first of its kind, so I guess I won't be too hard on it, but yeah. Well, I think that kind of leaves us to talk about the music now, and I actually do have quite a bit to say for this one, because that was the one thing that, I mean, all of it, its uniqueness and flavor really stood out to me, but the music was one of those things that just really caught my attention, and I found myself re-listening to the score over and over and over for a good couple of weeks after, and intermittently with like other music, and just going, man, there's something about this one. So I'm going to kind of probably take a deep dive with a number of different tracks, and just give a kind of general comment of some things to listen to as we go through it, and then I'll play a sample so you can kind of maybe pay attention to what I'm mentioning. So the score opens with the bellowing cry of a whale, which I'm assuming plays a larger role in the story. It certainly makes for a unique and noteworthy motif to begin a full-fledged score such as this. Hiroki Kikuta, this is like his main piece of work. He's done some other things since Secret of Mana, but most of it is kind of like, you know, a port of Secret of Mana or like a rendition of some of the other tracks he's already done. There's a few other games, but none of which that I recognized or had really heard much of. So this is kind of like his tour de force, if you could call it that. So some of the other good tracks here are Into the Thick of It. This has an autumn vibe to it that relays the passing of time and is aptly placed at the start of the journey. A Wish. This track knows when the listener needs to hear the resolution one more time to help solidify the intense yet somber emotion. And the composer strings you along, but also knows what to do with you once he has your attention, and so I really like that piece. Another one I really like is called Prophecy. This is a rhythmic finale that escalates in two distinct phases, which seemingly connect via flute. The strings are low octave and slow, and then they go high octave and fast, and the flute follows this pattern, but not in the exact same way, so there's a bit of dynamic interplay there. It's actually very fast to start with, and then it changes into a variant akin to its first phase for this first half of the second wave. Another one that I really like is called Ceremony, and this one borrows from the score for Akira to make a light-sounding creepiness. So if you've ever heard the score to Akira, it's phenomenal, but there's like one really creepy one that has a kind of music box, like a lighthearted music box feel, and this song very much reminded me of that, so it was a cool connection. And then Eternal Recurrence. This is one of my favorite ones. It's a piano and string build for this prelude, and then it goes into a majestic bell triumph, and then into a very rapid flute solo that makes things ethereal and urgent, but eventually soothes back into that piano and strings once again. And then my kind of final overall thoughts on the score is that the game's story and visuals are, in some sense, at odds with one another. One is dripping with somber homesickness, while the other is delightfully cheery and teeming with life. And the music, I felt, accomplishes the enormous challenge of making the two actually work in harmony together. And then the orchestra is just pleasing to the ear. You got the music boxes, you got flutes, you got choir, strings, percussion. There's a lot of different sounds layered on top of one another, making for easy listening that also soothes and aches in a heartfelt way that is just truly mesmerizing.
I think I do agree with what you're saying, where the story and the visuals are kind of at odds with each other. Like, the vibrancy of the visuals really does feel like it should clash a little bit more with the kind of almost depressingness of, like, starting the story off by getting kicked out of your village that you were kind of already just orphaned into.
Yeah.
And, like,
Poor
I know
kid.
that's kind of a trope, but it's also a little bit like, this kind of sucks. And, like, there's a real sense of doom. There's, like, a threat of war hanging over the entire thing. The first time you walk in the first major city after Podos, your hometown, the first thing you hear from someone is, like, the guard saying, like, hey, don't talk to the people, they're being weird. And then you, like, try and talk to the people and they're all just eerily silent. And it's still, like, this very vibrant, beautiful, like, world, but it's very unsettling that no one's talking to you and everyone's just kind of being hypnotized. And, like, I remember walking into a house and, like, there's these kids that are like, what's wrong with mommy and daddy? And you go and try and talk to their mom and dad and you just get the ellipses. And you're like, well, sorry, kid, I can't help you.
Yeah, it's got this really dark undertone to it that the visuals... Yeah. They initially clash, but again, I think that music does such a nice job of marrying the two. And it's one of those things, too, if you can rely on a different facet of the game to make your other components make sense together, I think that's like a true achievement.
Yeah, definitely.
So, if you like to play Secret of Mana yourself, there's, of course, the Super Nintendo version, but you can also play it as the Collection of Mana on Nintendo Switch, which is literally the same game. It's just been ported to newer hardware.
And just one thing on that, it also includes the Final Fantasy The Adventure, which is kind of the prequel to this, and Trials of Mana, which is the sequel to this, which I think we're going to talk about next season, as it came out in Japan in 1994, I believe.
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, I don't think it had a US release, if I remember right. And so this will be its chance to kind of...
Yeah, I'm excited to actually play through that one. I've heard a lot of really good things about it, so...
Nice. You can also play the remake on Steam, but that version has a really different art style, so don't know how much we would actually recommend it. I guess if you like chibi, then you could try that. And thanks, Tom, for joining me, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode.